15,000 feet above the Burmese jungle, two men are about to meet. One American, 23 years old, falling through the sky in a parachute harness, bleeding from shrapnel wounds, watching a Mitsubishi Zero fighter circle back toward him with machine guns trained on his chest. One Japanese, 29 years old, flying at 95 miles per hour just above stall speed canopy, open to get a clear view of the enemy he's been ordered to kill. In 47 seconds, one will pull a trigger, the other will die. But this is not a story about death. It's a story about what happens when enemies discover they were more alike than different. About how one impossible moment would connect two families across an ocean for 60 years. About the weight of taking a life and the grace of giving forgiveness. March 31st, 1944, 10:15 in the morning. The war in the Pacific has been raging for 2 years, 4 months, and 24 days. 50 million people will die before it ends. But on this morning and this moment, the entire war narrows down to two men suspended between earth and sky, both terrified, both doing what they believe they must do to get home to the people they love. What neither man knows in this moment is that they have daughters the same age, that they both sang the same melody to put their children to sleep at night. That one dreamed of teaching school in Kyoto, while the other dreamed of teaching shop class in Texas. That in another world, in another time, they might have been colleagues, friends, brothers. What neither man knows is that 38 years from now, their families will stand together at a grave in Japan, weeping not from grief, but from gratitude. That the bullet about to be fired will create not just a death, but a bridge between nations, between hearts, between the bitter past and the peaceful future. But all of that is still to come. Right now, there is only the ski bum, the parachute, the fighter, the gun, and two men trapped in something bigger than both of them. That morning before the sun rose over India, Second Lieutenant Daniel Carson ate his last Texas breakfast for 14 months. Eggs, scrambled made from powder, but reconstituted with real cream someone had traded for a week's worth of cigarettes. Bacon, 4 strips crispy at the edges, chewy in the middle, cooked in a cast iron skillet over a wood fire. The smell alone was enough to make a man weep. Coffee, strong and black, no sugar, the way his father took it every morning at Carson Hardware back in Sweetwater. Danny Carson held that tin cup of coffee in both hands and closed his eyes. The steam rose into his face. For just a moment, he wasn't at a makeshift airfield carved from an Indian tea plantation. He was home, Saturday morning. His mother humming in the kitchen, his father reading the newspaper at the table, the sound of bacon popping in the pan, the smell of coffee mixing with the scent of honeysuckle coming through the open window. Sarah would be there soon. Sarah Mitchell, 21 years old, school teacher, hair the color of wheat in August, eyes that saw right through all his pretending to be brave. She'd bring fresh eggs from her father's chickens. They'd sit on the porch after breakfast and plan their future. A wedding, a house on Elm Street, children, 3, maybe 4, a life so ordinary it seemed like paradise. Danny opened his eyes. The tea plantation stared back at him. 7,000 miles from Texas, 7,000 miles from Sarah, 7,000 miles from the life he had been promised. He took a bite of bacon. The salt exploded on his tongue. The fat melted. The smoke taste filled his mouth. For 5 seconds, he was home. For 5 seconds, the war didn't exist. For 5 seconds, he was just a kid from Texas eating breakfast on a Saturday morning. Then his co-pilot sat down across from him with his own plate. Mark Sullivan, 26, Brooklyn, loud, funny, never stopped talking. The kind of guy who could make you laugh even when you were pretty sure you were about to die. "How you doing, Texas?" Danny swallowed. "Good, real good. This bacon's something. Better than that spam they've been feeding us." Mark bit into his own strip. "You think the Japs eat bacon?" Danny shrugged. "Different culture? Probably not. Heard they eat raw fish." "Can you imagine?" Mark laughed. "No, thank you. Give me a good steak any day. Medium rare. Mashed potatoes, green beans with bacon, apple pie for dessert." "Stop it. You're killing me. What I wouldn't give for my mother's pot roast right now." Mark closed his eyes. She'd make it every Sunday. Carrots, potatoes, onions. The meat would just fall apart. And the gravy. God, the gravy. Danny smiled despite himself. "My girl Sarah makes fried chicken. best in West Texas. She soaks it in buttermilk overnight, then she coats it in flour with just the right amount of pepper, fries it up in a cast iron skillet until it's golden brown, crispy on the outside, juicy on the inside. I dream about that chicken. When we get home, I'm gonna eat for a week straight. Mark pointed his fork at Danny. 1 week, nothing but home cooking. My mother's pot roast, my sister's lasagna, my aunt's cannoli. I'm gonna gain 20 pounds and I'm not gonna care. When we get home, Danny said quietly, yeah, hey. Mark's voice dropped. We're getting home, Texas. All of us. This war's gonna end. We're gonna fly back to the States. You're gonna marry that pretty school teacher. I'm gonna eat my mother's cooking. We're gonna have kids and get fat and boring and happy. You hear me? Danny nodded. Yeah, I hear you. But something sat heavy in his chest, a feeling he couldn't name, like he was standing at the edge of something vast and dark. Like the world was about to change in ways he couldn't predict or control. He touched the handkerchief in his pocket. Sarah had embroidered it herself, white cotton, his initials in blue thread, DC. She'd given it to him the night before he shipped out, crying so hard she could barely speak. Come home to me, she'd whispered. Our future is waiting. He'd promised. Of course he'd promised. What else do you say to the woman you love when you're going off to war? Now sitting in the Indian heat eating bacon that tasted like Texas. Danny Carson wondered if he'd be able to keep that promise. 7,000 miles to the east on the other side of the war, Lieutenant Hiroshi Tanaka woke before dawn in his barracks at the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force Base outside Rangoon. He woke thinking of his daughter, Sakura, 5 years old, missing her 2 front teeth, always laughing, always asking questions that didn't have easy answers. Papa, do Americans eat rice? No, sweetheart. They eat different foods. Bread, meat, things we don't have. Are they different from us? Hiroshi had hesitated. In many ways, yes. They speak a different language. They have different customs. They come from a different place. But are they bad? Like the officers say, Hiroshi had looked at his daughter's face. So innocent, so trusting. He'd thought about the American prisoners he'd seen being marched through Rangoon the week before. Young men, dirty, scared, but human, undeniably human. Some people do bad things, Sakura, but that doesn't make all people bad. Do you understand? She'd nodded, even though he wasn't sure she really did understand, even though he wasn't sure he understood anymore himself. That had been 6 months ago, before his latest deployment, before the orders came down, before the war got even uglier than it already was. Now lying on his bunk in the Burmese heat, Hiroshi reached into the pocket of his uniform jacket hanging on the wall. His fingers found the photograph. Sakura, 5 years old, wearing her best kimono, smiling with that gap-toothed grin. She'd drawn a picture for him the day he left. Papa as an eagle flying high above the mountains. He'd kept that drawing folded in his locker. Something to remember why he was fighting, what he was protecting. Next to him, another pilot stirred. Early morning, Tanaka. Can't sleep, Hiroshi replied quietly. Thinking about the mission, Hiroshi didn't answer right away. The mission briefing had been clear. American bombers were heading toward Mandalay. The railway bridge. Supply line to our forces pushing into India. Stop them at any cost. And if they bail out, one of the younger pilots had asked. The squadron commander's face had hardened. No survivors. These men bomb our cities. They kill our women and children. They deserve no mercy. Hiroshi had said nothing, but something in his chest had twisted. He'd been a teacher before the war. Elementary school. 5 and 6-year-olds, including his own daughter. He'd taught them to read, to write, to add and subtract. He'd taught them kindness, respect, the value of human life. Now he was teaching death. Just thinking, Hiroshi finally said. About what? About going home, seeing my daughter again. She'll be 6 next month. You'll see her, his fellow pilot said. After we win this war, after we push the Americans back across the Pacific, you'll go home a hero. Your daughter will be proud. Hiroshi touched the photograph in his pocket. Yes, perhaps. But something felt different about this morning. A weight in the air, a sense that the world was balanced on a knife's edge and about to tip in a direction no one could predict. He got up, got dressed, walked to the mess hall through the pre-dawn darkness. Rice, miso soup, pickled vegetables, simple food, soldier's food. The younger pilots were excited, talking about the mission, about shooting down American bombers, about adding to their kill counts. Hiroshi ate in silence. He thought about his daughter, about his wife Yuki, about the classroom he'd left behind, about the lesson he'd been planning to teach the week the war started, about poetry, about cherry blossoms, about the beauty of spring. An older pilot sat down next to him. "You're quiet this morning, Tanaka." "Just thinking." About Hiroshi looked at the man. They'd flown together for 2 years. Good pilot, good man, father of 3. "Do you ever wonder," Hiroshi said slowly, "if the Americans have families too? Children, wives waiting for them?" The older pilot was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "If you think about that, you can't fly. You can't fight. You have to believe they're different, that they're the enemy, that what we're doing is necessary. But what if they're not different? Then we're all damned," the older pilot said quietly. "So we don't think about it. We do our duty. We protect our families. We go home. That's all we can do." Hiroshi nodded, but the weight in his chest didn't lift. After breakfast, after the briefing, after the final checks on his Zero, Hiroshi stood alone by his aircraft. He pulled out the photograph one more time. Sakura's face smiled up at him. "If I don't come back," he thought, "tell her I loved her. Tell her I tried. Tell her I was sorry it had to be this way." He kissed the photograph, put it carefully back in his pocket, climbed into his cockpit. The sun was rising over Burma. It was going to be a clear day, good visibility, no clouds to hide in. Somewhere to the west, American bombers were taking off, heading toward the bridge, heading toward him. Hiroshi closed his eyes for just a moment, said a silent prayer. Not for victory, not for glory, just to see his daughter again, just to go home. Then he started his engine and taxied toward the runway. The briefing room at the American base was crowded. 12 B-24 Liberator crews, 10 men per crew, 120 souls preparing to fly into hell. The intelligence officer pointed at the map on the wall. "Railway bridge at Mandalay. The Japanese are using it to move supplies and troops toward the Indian border. Take it out and we cut their supply line in half." "What about fighter cover?" someone asked. "Limited. We can give you escort for the first 100 miles. After that, you're on your own. Expected resistance heavy. The Japanese have at least 4 fighter groups in the area, maybe 140 aircraft. Zeros mostly. They're good. They're experienced. They've been flying combat missions since China. Don't underestimate them." "What about our bomber escorts?" The officer's face was grim. "Like I said, first 100 miles, then you're alone." Danny raised his hand. "And if we have to bail out..." The room went quiet. The officer looked at Danny. Then he looked at the map, then back at Danny. "Don't bail out," he said flatly. "The Japanese don't take prisoners from bomber crews if they can help it. And if they do take you prisoner, you'll wish they hadn't. What about the jungle, 200 miles of mountains controlled by Japanese infantry? No rescue teams, no friendly forces. Your best bet is to stay in your aircraft and get back to base. And if we can't, then pray, Lieutenant Carson. Pray hard." The briefing ended. The crews filed out. Danny walked slowly back toward his aircraft. His crew was already there doing the pre-flight checks. Mark Sullivan waved. "Hey, Texas, you ready for this?" "Ready as I'll ever be. It's going to be fine. We're going to drop our bombs, turn around, come back and have lunch. Easy day." Danny nodded, but the weight in his chest was heavier now. That feeling of standing at the edge of something dark and vast. He climbed aboard the B-24, found his position at the waist gun, checked his weapon, loaded ammunition, put on his flight gear. Mae West life jacket even though there was no water where they were going. Parachute harness, oxygen mask, heated flight suit because it would be 20 below zero at altitude. And in his pocket, Sarah's handkerchief. "Come home to me." The engine started, one by one. The sound building until the whole aircraft vibrated. Danny looked out the waist window, saw the other bombers starting their engines, saw the ground crew scrambling out of the way, saw the sun climbing higher in the eastern sky. "Beautiful morning to die," someone said over the intercom. Nervous laughter followed. The aircraft taxied to the runway, lined up, waited for the tower's clearance. Danny's heart was pounding. His mouth was dry. His hands were shaking. He'd flown 7 combat missions. This was number 8. 7 times he'd gone out and come back. 7 times he'd survived. 7 times he'd beaten the odds. But the odds don't stay in your favor forever. Eventually, the house wins. Eventually, luck runs out. The tower gave clearance. The engines roared. The B-24 accelerated down the runway. Faster, faster. The tail lifted. The nose came up. And then they were airborne, climbing toward the sun, 12 bombers heading toward Burma, toward the bridge, toward the waiting Zeros, toward destiny. At 9:47 in the morning, the war found them. Bandits, 10 o'clock high. The call came over the intercom, urgent and sharp. Danny spun toward his gun, squinted into the sun, saw them. 3 Zeros, diving out of the brightness like predators. Fast, deadly, absolutely committed. The formation scattered. The bomber escort peeled off to engage. But there were more Zeros than escorts. Always more. The first Zero came in from the front quarter. Cannon shells walked up the fuselage of the bomber, flying off Danny's left wing. One moment the aircraft was whole. The next moment it was trailing smoke. Fire bloomed in the number 3 engine. Then number 2, bail out. The radio crackled. Bail out, everyone out. Danny watched the crew abandoning the stricken bomber. 1, 2, 3, 4. White parachutes blossoming against the blue sky. Beautiful and terrible. Then the Zero that had attacked them circled back, dove toward the parachutes, and opened fire. No, Danny screamed, but there was nothing he could do, nothing but watch. The first parachutist jerked in his harness as the bullets found him. The canopy shredded. The man fell, tumbling, screaming. 10,000 feet, 9,000, 8. The scream cut off when the body hit the jungle canopy. The Zero pulled up, banked, selected another target. Our ship shuddered. Cannon fire ripped through the tail section. Someone was yelling. The whole aircraft bucked like a living thing trying to shake off a predator. Engine 3 is on fire, Mark's voice. Calm despite the chaos. We're losing altitude. Can we make it back negative? Fire's spreading. We need to bail out, now, the pilot came on the intercom. All crew, prepare to abandon aircraft. Repeat. Prepare to abandon aircraft. Danny's hands moved automatically. Checked his parachute. Tightened the harness. Looked for the exit. The waist door was already open. Wind screaming through. Temperature dropping as they descended. The jungle below looked peaceful. Green. Like a carpet. Like something soft. But Danny knew better. 200 miles of mountains. Japanese infantry. No rescue. Just survival or death. Go, go, go. The pilot's last command. Danny jumped. The slipstream grabbed him, spun him. The world became chaos. Sky, jungle. Sky, jungle. His hands found the ripcord. Pulled. The parachute deployed with a crack like a gunshot. The harness jerked him upright. And suddenly everything was quiet. The bombers were distant dots now. The battle a silent movie playing out miles away. Danny hung suspended in the enormous empty sky, drifting down, down toward the green carpet that wasn't soft at all. He looked around, counted parachutes. 12. His whole crew had made it out. 12 men floating, 12 targets, and circling above them like sharks, 3 Zeros. Danny's hand went to his hip, found the M1911 pistol holstered there. 7 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. 8 shots total, standard issue sidearm, for survival on the ground, for signaling rescuers, for defense against wild animals. Nobody had ever mentioned aerial combat. The first Zero dove, selected Tommy Brennan, the tail gunner, 21 years old, farm kid from Iowa, married 3 months before shipping out. His wife was pregnant, due in October. Tommy had shown everyone the letter, had been so proud, so happy. The Zero came in from behind, close, maybe 100 feet, opened up with machine guns, tracers stitched through the air, through Tommy's parachute canopy. Through Tommy. Tommy's scream carried across the empty sky. Then he was falling, spinning, the parachute collapsing, falling. Falling, impact, silence. Danny felt something break inside his chest. Not Tommy, God, not Tommy. The second Zero selected Mark Sullivan, Danny's co-pilot, his friend. The man who'd been talking about his mother's pot roast just hours ago. The Zero approached head-on, firing from 300 yards out. Most of the rounds missed, but two found their mark. Mark jerked, went limp, body still descending, but already dead. Danny's vision blurred. Tears, rage, helplessness. The third Zero was circling, hunting, looking for its next victim. And then it saw Danny. It banked, lined up, started its approach. Danny's hand tightened on his pistol grip, but he didn't draw. Not yet. Drawing the weapon would reveal he was alive, armed, dangerous. Instead, Danny made a decision that went against every survival instinct he possessed. He went completely limp. Head dropped forward onto his chest, arms dangling loose, legs motionless, body hanging slack in the harness. He became a corpse, pre-killed, not worth the ammunition. The shrapnel wound in his thigh helped, blood soaking through his flight suit, visible against the white parachute silk. He looked like the others. He looked dead. The Zero slowed. The pilot was being cautious, conserving ammunition, making sure. Through half-closed eyes, Danny watched the fighter approach. Closer, closer. The pilot throttled back to 95 miles per hour, just above stall speed, opened his canopy for a better view. 75 yards, 50, 30, close enough to see the pilot's face. Young, maybe late 20s. Serious expression. Focused, professional. The pilot studied Danny's face, looked for signs of life, signs of deception. Danny held absolutely still, controlled his breathing, prayed his chest wasn't rising and falling visibly, prayed the pilot would believe, would move on, would let him live. For 2 seconds, their eyes met, and in those 2 seconds, Danny saw something that changed everything. The pilot's eyes weren't filled with hatred, weren't filled with bloodlust. They were filled with weariness, with resignation, with the same trapped helplessness that Danny felt. The pilot didn't want to be here any more than Danny did, didn't want to kill defenseless men, didn't want to murder people hanging in parachutes who couldn't fight back. But orders were orders. Duty was duty. The war demanded it. The pilot's hand moved toward the throttle. He was going to leave, going to spare Danny, going to move on to another target or return to base. But then his eyes swept back to Danny's face one more time, and Danny saw it, the pilot's decision, the moment he chose to verify, to be certain, to do his job completely. The Zero drifted closer, 25 feet, 20, close enough to smell the exhaust, close enough to see the red circle painted on the fuselage, close enough to read the kanji characters on the cowling. This was it, the moment. Now or never. Danny's head came up, slowly, deliberately. The pilot's eyes went wide. Danny's right hand moved. One smooth motion. Drew the M1911 from its holster on his left hip. Brought it up, extended his arm. The pilot reached for the throttle, pushed it forward. The Zero started to accelerate. Too slow, too late. Danny pointed the pistol at the open cockpit. No time for proper aim, no way to achieve a stable shooting platform while hanging in a parachute harness. Just instinct, just desperation. The Zero filled his vision, 30 feet away. The pilot's face frozen in shock. For one heartbeat, they looked at each other again. Really looked. Two men, same age, both far from home, both wanting to live. Both trapped in a war neither had started. Danny squeezed the trigger. The first shot cracked across the sky, punched through the open canopy, missed the pilot's head by inches, exited through the opposite side. The pilot flinched, banked hard right. Danny tracked the movement, fired again. The second shot hit the canopy frame, ricocheted. Fragments peppered the pilot's shoulder. He cried out, lost control for half a second. Danny fired the third shot. This round entered the cockpit, traveled 28 inches, struck the pilot behind his right ear. The pilot's body went rigid, then limp, slumped forward against the control stick. The Zero's nose dropped. The aircraft entered an uncommanded dive, left wing low, spinning, accelerating toward the jungle 11,000 feet below. Danny fired his fourth shot, aimed at the engine cowling, hoping to hit the fuel tank, make it quick, make it certain. The round penetrated the thin aluminum, found nothing critical, exited clean. But it didn't matter. The pilot was dead or dying, and a zero without a pilot was just falling metal. Danny watched it spiral down, watched it disappear into the jungle canopy, counted the seconds. 5, 6, 7. At 8 seconds, a fireball bloomed, orange and black, visible for miles. The sound reached him 2 seconds later, a dull thump like distant thunder. Danny's arm dropped. The pistol hung loose in his hand. He was shaking, breathing hard, tears streaming down his face. He'd killed a man, not from the safe distance of a bomber gun, not in the chaos of aerial combat where you never see the face of who you're shooting at. He'd killed a man from 30 feet away, had looked into his eyes, had seen his humanity, his fear, his resignation, and had killed him anyway. 3 rounds left in the pistol, 2 zeros still circling above. But they were far away, engaged with other targets. They hadn't seen what happened, hadn't seen the impossible kill. Danny holstered the weapon. His hand trembled so badly he almost dropped it. Below him, the jungle was getting closer. 2,000 feet, 1,500, 1,000. He looked around. 6 American parachutes still in the air. 6 men who might make it to the ground alive. But the ground was just the beginning. After that came 200 miles of enemy territory. Japanese infantry. No food, no water, no rescue. If he survived the landing, he'd have maybe 5 days before he died of thirst or infection or capture. Tommy was dead. Mark was dead. 4 others dead. Half his crew gone. And somewhere in that burning wreckage below, a Japanese pilot was dead too. A pilot with a face Danny would remember for the rest of his life. A pilot who'd hesitated, who'd shown mercy, who'd died because Danny had chosen to live. The jungle canopy rushed up. Danny pulled on the risers, tried to steer toward a clearing, missed, hit the trees at 20 feet per second. Branches broke. The parachute caught. He jerked to a stop, hanging 40 feet above the ground. Cut the harness, dropped, landed hard. Pain exploded in his wounded thigh. He lay there for a moment, breathing, alive, impossibly alive. Somewhere to the south, black smoke rose from the zero crash. Somewhere above, the battle continued. Somewhere in Texas, Sarah was teaching school, unaware that the man she loved had just become a killer. Danny pulled himself to his feet, buried his parachute, checked his wounds, found his bearings, and started walking. But he carried something heavier than his pack, heavier than his wounds, heavier than the pistol at his hip. He carried the weight of a man's death, the image of a face, the memory of eyes that had seen him not as an enemy, but as another human being trapped in an impossible situation. That weight would stay with him for 38 years, until a letter arrived from Japan, from a woman named Yuki, a widow. A letter that began, "Mr. Carson, my husband died by your hand, but I need to thank you." But that was still to come. Right now, there was only the jungle, the heat, the pain, the beginning of a journey that would last the rest of his life. Behind him, smoke rose into the clear blue sky. Ahead of him, survival, capture, suffering, and eventually redemption. But Danny Carson didn't know that yet. All he knew was that he'd killed a man who didn't want to die, and that he'd have to live with that for as long as he drew breath. The war continued. But for Danny, something had changed. Something had broken. Or maybe something had opened. He would never be the same. Danny Carson landed in triple canopy jungle, 3 miles from where his bomber had exploded into flames. The parachute caught in the high branches. He hung there for 30 seconds, 40 feet above the ground, listening to the silence that comes after violence. No birds, no insects, just the distant thump of artillery and the closer sound of his own breathing. He cut the harness, dropped. His wounded leg buckled when he hit. The pain was white hot, electric. He bit down on a scream and tasted blood where his teeth cut his lip. For a long moment, he lay there in the undergrowth, listened, waited, tried to decide if he was going to die right here or somewhere else. The jungle smelled like rot and growth happening at the same time. Everything decomposing, everything being born. The cycle of life compressed into one overwhelming scent that made him want to vomit. He didn't vomit. He got up, checked his gear. Pistol, 3 rounds left. Survival knife. Empty canteen. First aid kit with 2 bandages and a tube of sulfa powder. Broken compass, no map, no radio, no hope of rescue. 200 miles of enemy territory between him and safety. 5 days if the infection didn't kill him first. Danny buried the parachute. White silk was too visible, too easy to track. He covered it with leaves and branches and tried not to think about how this felt like covering a body. Then he started walking north, away from the Japanese lines, toward India, toward home, toward Sarah. He made it maybe 200 yards before he heard voices. Japanese. Close. A patrol sweeping the area for survivors. Danny dropped behind a fallen log, pressed himself into the mud, held his breath. His heart hammered so hard he was sure they could hear it. 8 soldiers passed within 30 feet. Young men, tired, carrying rifles, talking quietly among themselves. Just doing their job, just trying to survive the war same as him. One of them stopped, lit a cigarette, stood there smoking not 10 feet from where Danny hid. The soldier looked right at the log, right at the spot where Danny's shoulder was visible, if you knew where to look. The soldier took a long drag, exhaled smoke that drifted through the jungle, heat. Danny's hand found his pistol. 3 rounds. He could take 3 of them before they got him. Maybe 4 if he was lucky. But then what? The others would kill him. Or worse, they'd capture him. And from what the intelligence officer had said, being captured by the Japanese meant torture. Slow death. No Geneva Convention in this theater. No mercy. The soldier finished his cigarette, ground it out under his boot, moved on. Danny waited until he couldn't hear them anymore, then waited another 10 minutes, then started moving again. That night he found a stream, drank until his stomach cramped, refilled his canteen even though he had no way to purify the water. Dysentery or dehydration. Pick your poison. He tried to sleep, but every sound was a threat. Every rustle in the undergrowth could be a patrol, a tiger, a snake. Death came in many forms in the Burmese jungle, and most of them didn't care which side you fought for. Around midnight, the fever started. Low grade. Just enough to make everything feel distant and wrong. The shrapnel wound in his thigh was infected, red streaks radiating from the entry point. Blood poisoning. He had maybe 48 hours before sepsis set in. Danny used his last bandage to pack the wound, sprinkled in the sulfa powder, said a prayer he wasn't sure anyone was listening to. Then he thought about the Japanese pilot. The man's face kept appearing in his mind. That last moment before Danny pulled the trigger. The recognition in his eyes, the understanding, the acceptance. They'd seen each other. Really seen each other. 2 men. Not enemies, just men. And now one of them was dead. Danny wondered if the pilot had a family, a wife, children. Someone waiting for him to come home who would never see him again. He wondered what the pilot's last thought had been. If it was anger, fear, regret, or if it was the same thing Danny would think in that position. Just let me see them one more time. The fever climbed. Danny's thoughts became jumbled. He saw Sarah, saw his mother, saw Tommy Brennan falling from the sky screaming, saw Mark Sullivan's body going limp in the parachute harness, saw the pilot's eyes, always the pilot's eyes. He woke at dawn, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. The fever had spiked during the night, 104 degrees, maybe higher. His vision swam. His hands wouldn't work right. Malaria or blood poisoning, or both. Didn't matter. The result was the same. He was dying. Danny tried to stand, made it to his knees, fell back down. This is it, he thought. This is where it ends. Alone in a jungle 7,000 miles from home. Sarah will never know what happened. She'll just get a telegram. Missing in action. Presumed dead. She'll wait anyway. That's who she is. She'll wait and hope and pray until hope becomes a kind of torture. I'm sorry, Sarah. I tried. I really tried. He closed his eyes, waited for death. It didn't come. Instead, hours passed. The sun climbed higher. The heat became unbearable. Danny drifted in and out of consciousness. Saw things that weren't there. Heard voices that made no sense. At some point, he crawled to the stream. Drank. Vomited. Drank again. At some point, he found wild bananas growing on a vine. ate 3, saved 2 in his pocket. At some point, he realized he'd lost an entire day. On the third day, the hallucinations got worse. He saw his father standing in the jungle wearing his hardware store apron. Saw Sarah in her Sunday dress. Saw the Japanese pilot alive walking toward him with his hands out. "I'm sorry," Danny tried to say. "I didn't want to kill you." The pilot smiled. Spoke in perfect English, even though Danny knew that was impossible. "I know, I didn't want to kill you either. But the war doesn't care what we want." "Who are you?" Danny asked. "What's your name?" The hallucination didn't answer, just faded back into the jungle. On the fourth day, Danny's leg gave out completely. He tried to walk and collapsed. Tried again, collapsed again. He was done. Finished. He'd made it maybe 15 miles in 4 days. 185 miles to go. Might as well be 1,000. He lay down beside a water buffalo trail, too exhausted to care anymore. Too sick to be afraid. If they find me, they find me. He must have passed out because when he woke up, there were boots in his field of vision. Japanese army boots. 6 pairs. Rough hands grabbed him, rolled him over. Someone shouted. One kicked him in the ribs. Danny tried to reach for his pistol, but his arm wouldn't obey. Someone stomped on his hand. He heard bones crack. Felt the pain, but distantly, like it was happening to someone else. They took the pistol, the knife, his dog tags, searched his pockets, found Sarah's handkerchief. One soldier held it up, laughed, said something in Japanese. Another soldier slapped him, hard enough to split his lip. Danny didn't care, couldn't care. He was beyond caring. They threw him in the back of a truck. 6-hour drive over roads that weren't really roads. Every bounce sent agony through his broken hand and infected leg. Other prisoners in the truck with him, British, Australian, all beaten, all starved, all silent. One man leaned close, whispered in Danny's ear with a British accent, "Welcome to hell, mate. It only gets worse from here." The truck arrived at Rangoon Central Prison at dusk, a massive colonial-era building that the British had built to hold criminals and the Japanese had converted to hold prisoners of war. 800 men inside, 30% mortality rate within 6 months. No medical care, minimal food, maximum suffering. They processed Danny like he was a piece of meat, stripped him naked, shaved his head, hosed him down with cold water, threw him a rice sack uniform. No shoes, no underwear, just the sack. A Japanese doctor looked at his leg wound, prodded it with dirty fingers, said something to a guard, laughed. The guard spoke broken English. "Doctors say you die soon. Maybe 1 week, maybe 2. He shrugged. "Not our problem." They dragged Danny to cell block C, 3rd floor, room 7. The cell was 12 feet by 15 feet, concrete floor, 1 barred window, 1 bucket for waste, 11 men already inside. They looked up when the guard shoved Danny through the door, 11 pairs of eyes assessing, calculating, deciding if he was strong enough to be worth the effort of keeping alive or if he'd just take up space and food for a few days before dying. One man stood, tall, gaunt, Australian accent. Name's Morrison, Jack Morrison, Captain, Royal Australian Air Force. "Welcome to paradise, Lieutenant." Danny tried to speak, couldn't. His throat was too dry, his fever too high. He collapsed on the concrete floor. Danny woke to someone spooning water into his mouth. Cool water, clean water, precious water. Easy, mate. Slow sips. Too much and you'll vomit. Danny opened his eyes, saw Jack Morrison's face. Older than Danny, maybe 35. Used to be handsome, probably. Now just angles and shadows where flesh used to be. "How long?" Danny croaked. 2 days. "We thought you were done, but you're tougher than you look." Danny tried to sit up. Couldn't. Everything hurt. "Your hand's infected," Jack said. "Leg too. We cleaned them as best we could. No antibiotics, no medicine. Just water and hope." He paused. "You'll probably lose the fingers, the hand if we're unlucky, but you might live, if you want to." "Do I?" Danny asked. "Want to live?" Jack smiled, sad smile, knowing smile. "That's the question, isn't it? Every man in here has to answer that question every single day." Some answer yes, some answer no. The ones who answer no don't last long. What do you answer? I answer yes, because I have two daughters in Sydney, Emily and Grace, 8 and 6, and I promised them I'd come home. So I'm going home, no matter what it takes. Danny thought about Sarah, about the handkerchief the Japanese had taken, about the promise he'd made. Come home to me. I want to live, he said. Good, then we'll keep you alive. Jack stood. But you have to do your part. You have to eat. Even when the food makes you sick. You have to drink, even when the water tastes like death. You have to survey. Understand? Danny nodded. Welcome to the family, Lieutenant. We're all brothers here. We take care of each other. It's the only way any of us makes it out. Over the next weeks, Danny learned the routine, the rhythm, the rules of survival in hell. 5:30 in the morning. Wake call. Bugle and shouting. Stand at attention outside the cells for roll call. 2 or 3 men dead every week. Bodies removed without ceremony. Tossed on carts. Buried in mass graves outside the camp. 6 o'clock. Morning rice. Watery congee. Sometimes with weevils. Sometimes with things that might be vegetables. 1 bowl per man, maybe 300 calories. A third of what a man needed to survive. Danny couldn't eat the first week. His stomach rejected everything. The dysentery was too bad, the nausea too strong. A younger prisoner named Hank Kowalski force-fed him, held Danny's head, spooned the rice into his mouth, made him swallow. Eat or die, Texas. Your choice. Hank was 22, farm boy from Wisconsin, optimistic despite everything, always smiling, always talking about going home. My mom makes the best pot roast, he'd say. Carrots, potatoes, onions. The meat just falls apart. And her apple pie. God, her apple pie. Cinnamon and butter and love. That's what it tastes like. Love. The men would listen to Hank describe food. It was torture and comfort at the same time. Torture because they were starving. Comfort because remembering good food meant remembering home. Life before the war. Something worth surviving for. Danny talked about Sarah's fried chicken, the buttermilk soak, the crispy coating, the way it tasted like Sunday afternoons and front porch swings and everything good in the world. Another prisoner, a British flight officer named James Davies, talked about his wife's shepherd's pie, the layers of lamb and vegetables, the mashed potato crust, the way she'd serve it with fresh bread and butter. We'd eat it, Davies said, his voice distant and dreamy by the fire. Winter nights, the kids would be in bed, just me and Margaret, eating and talking about nothing important, just being together. Davies was dying. Everyone knew it. The dysentery was too far advanced. He'd lost too much weight, weighed maybe 85 pounds. Used to weigh 160, but he still shared his rice with Danny those first 2 weeks when Danny couldn't keep food down. You need it more than me, Davies would say. I'm on my way out. You're still fighting. Take it. Danny tried to refuse. Davies wouldn't let him. Listen, Texas, I'm done. I know it. I've made my peace, but you can make it. You're young, strong, stubborn. You can go home. So you're going to take this rice. You're going to eat it. And someday when you're old and fat and happy, you're going to remember me. Deal. Deal, Danny whispered. Davies died 3 weeks later, at 2:37 in the morning. Danny held his hand, felt the life leave, heard the last breath. The British pilot's final words were barely audible. Tell Margaret I tried. Tell her I bloody tried. In the morning the guards came, pulled Davies' body from the cell, threw it on the cart with the others. No ceremony, no dignity, just disposal. Jack Morrison stood the men at attention, spoke quietly. James Davies, flight lieutenant, husband, friend, father of two. He died free in his mind. Remember him? The men stood silent for 1 minute, then sat back down. Danny took Davies' boots. Too large, but better than nothing. He'd promised to take them, to use them, to walk home in them. That night, Danny wept for the first time since capture. Wept for Davies, for Tommy and Mark, for all the dead, for the Japanese pilot whose name he'd never know. Jack Morrison sat beside him, said nothing, just sat there. Sometimes that was enough. On Danny's second month in Rangoon, everything changed. A new guard arrived, young, maybe 25. Japanese features, but something different about him, the way he moved. The way he watched the prisoners was something that wasn't quite hatred. The other guards didn't like him. That was obvious. They spoke to him in clipped tones, excluded him from their conversations, treated him like he was contaminated. The prisoners noticed, whispered among themselves, wondered what it meant. On his third day, the new guard brought Danny a cup of water, outside of meal times, against the rules. Drink, he said in perfect English. No accent, American English, West Coast. Danny stared at him, at his uniform, at his face. Who are you? The guard glanced around, made sure no one was watching, then spoke quickly, quietly. My name is Kenji Yamamoto. I was born in Sacramento, California. My family owned a farm, grew strawberries. In 1942, the government sent us to Manzanar internment camp. I volunteered for the Army to prove my loyalty. They sent me here. He paused. I'm American lieutenant. Same as you. I'm just wearing the wrong uniform. Danny didn't know what to say. Didn't know if this was real or some kind of interrogation trick. Kenji must have seen the doubt. He pulled something from his pocket, showed it quickly. An American flag patch, worn, faded, hidden in the lining of his boot. I keep this to remember who I am, Kenji whispered. I'm American. I'm helping you because you're my brother. All of you, you're my people, even if my people don't want me anymore. He put the flag away. Drink the water. I'll bring more when I can. But be careful. If the other guards find out I'm helping you, they'll kill me, and probably kill you too. Then he was gone. Danny told Jack Morrison. Jack was skeptical. Could be a trick. Could be trying to get us to trust him so we give up information. Or he could be telling the truth, Danny said. They watched Kenji over the following weeks, watched how the other guards treated him, how he moved through the camp, how he looked at the prisoners when he thought no one was watching. He's telling the truth, Jack finally said. He's one of us, trapped same as we are. Kenji brought them small things, extra water, a scrap of soap, once incredibly a Hershey bar, melted, old, probably from a Red Cross package that had been sitting in a warehouse for months. Danny held that chocolate bar like it was gold, broke it into 12 pieces, one for each man in the cell. The taste was indescribable, sweet, rich, American. Home. Danny closed his eyes, and for 5 seconds, he was back in Sweetwater, the drugstore on Main Street. Sarah across from him in a booth, sharing a chocolate malt, making plans for their future. He opened his eyes. The concrete cell stared back, but the taste lingered. The memory, the hope. Thank you, he whispered when Kenji came by later. You gave us more than chocolate. You gave us a piece of home. Kenji's eyes were wet. I miss it too, he said. Real American breakfast, bacon and eggs, hash browns, toast, my mother's pancakes. We're all homesick for the same home, Danny said. Kenji nodded. Yeah, we are. In September, month 6 of captivity, the Japanese found contraband in cell block C. Someone had smuggled in medicine, food, supplies. The Commandant Major Yamamoto, no relation to Kenji, was furious. Ordered every prisoner in the block beaten until someone confessed. They went cell by cell, pulled men out, beat them with bamboo rods, rifle butts, fists. Danny took his beating without talking. 20 strikes across his back, each one like fire. Each one tearing skin. But he didn't talk. None of the prisoners talked, because they all knew it was Kenji, and Kenji was protecting them, was risking his life to give them the bare minimum needed to survive. That night, Kenji came to Danny's cell, face grim, determined. They'll find out tomorrow, he said quietly. I'm turning myself in. No, Danny said. They'll kill you, yes. But you'll live. That's what Americans do. We protect each other. You can't. We need you. You need hope more than you need me. And maybe my death will give you that. Proof that some of us still believe in something bigger than ourselves. Kenji reached into his boot, pulled out the flag patch, handed it to Danny. Keep this. Give it to my family if you survive. Tell them I died American. Tell them to be proud. He pulled out a photograph. His family, parents, brothers, sisters, standing in front of a strawberry field, smiling. Tell them I chose this, that it was worth it. Danny couldn't speak, couldn't process what was happening. Kenji pulled out one more thing. A letter. Already written. Already sealed. For my parents. It explains everything. My choice. My reasons. My love. The next morning, Kenji confessed. They dragged him to the courtyard. Made all 800 prisoners watch. The commandant gave a speech. About betrayal. About dishonor. About the price of treason. Kenji knelt, blindfolded, hands bound. He didn't beg, didn't cry, didn't ask for mercy. His last words carried across the silent courtyard. Stars and stripes forever. Tell my family. The sword came down. It was quick, professional, final. Kenji Yamamoto died at 9:42 in the morning on September 14, 1944. 25 years old. American. Hero. The prisoners were forced to stay standing for another hour. Lesson learned. Message delivered. When they were finally dismissed back to their cells, Danny collapsed. Jack Morrison and Hank Kowalski carried him, laid him on the concrete, and sat with him while he wept. He chose honor, Jack said quietly. American honor, to die protecting his brothers. That's what we do. That's who we are. Danny clutched the flag patch in his hand, felt the fabric, the worn threads, the weight of a promise. I'll survive, he said through his tears. I'll tell his story. I'll make sure everyone knows what he did. Good, Jack said. Then his death means something. That night, Danny made a vow. To himself, to Kenji's memory, to the Japanese pilot he'd killed. I will survive this. I will go home. I will tell both their stories. They were men, not enemies. Men. And they deserve to be remembered. The months passed. October, November, December, January. More men died. Disease, starvation, brutality. The count went down every week. But Danny survived. Hank survived. Jack survived. 3 men who refused to give up, who kept each other alive through memory and hope and stubborn determination. They recited recipes, described homes, told stories, anything to stay human. To remember there was a world outside the wire, a world worth returning to. In March, Danny was called for interrogation. The commandant wanted information about bombing tactics, aircraft capabilities, base locations. Danny gave name, rank, serial number. Nothing else. They beat him, broke 2 ribs, withheld food for 6 days, put him in an isolation box. The box was 4 feet by 4 feet by 3 feet tall. Metal roof, no light, no ventilation. Temperature inside climbed to 120 degrees during the day. 14 days Danny spent in that box. 14 days of heat and darkness and suffocation. He survived by doing mathematics in his head, calculating pi to 50 digits, reciting multiplication tables, solving equations that had no purpose except to keep his mind functioning. And he remembered Texas summers, ice cream at the drugstore, Sarah's smile, his father's hardware store, cool mornings and cold lemonade, and everything beautiful about the world he'd left behind. I will survive, he whispered to the darkness. I will go home. I will tell them. Kenji, the pilot, all of them. I will make sure they're remembered. On day 14, they pulled him out. He couldn't walk, couldn't see, had lost 15 more pounds he couldn't afford to lose. But he'd survived. Jack and Hank nursed him back, fed him, gave him water, talked to him when the nightmares came. You're still here, Hank said. That's what matters. You're still fighting. April came. May. The war turned. News filtered in through new prisoners. The Allies were winning, slowly, steadily, pushing the Japanese back. Hope grew, fragile, dangerous, but real. On May 1st, artillery could be heard in the distance. British forces approaching Rangoon. On May 5th, the guards began evacuating, burning papers, destroying records, preparing to retreat. The prisoners waited, terrified. Would the guards execute them before leaving? Would they be left to starve? Would liberation actually come on May 6th at dawn? The cell doors opened. British soldiers stood there. Tanks in the courtyard. The Union Jack flying. You're free, a British sergeant said. You're going home. Danny walked out of cell block C into the morning sun. 93 pounds, down from 165. Malaria, dysentery, beriberi, broken bones that had healed wrong, teeth loose from malnutrition, but alive. He fell to his knees, wept. For the first time in 13 months, wept not from pain, but from relief. A British medic knelt beside him. "It's over, mate. The war's over for you. You made it." Danny looked at his hands, at the flag patch he still carried, at Kenji's photograph, at the memory of everything he'd endured. "I made it," he whispered. "Now I have to make it mean something." He thought about the Japanese pilot, about Kenji, about Davies and Tommy and Mark and all the dead. He thought about promises made and promises kept. And he knew that the hardest part was still ahead. Going home, learning to live with what he'd seen, what he'd done, what he carried. But he was alive, against impossible odds, through hell and back. He was alive. And that meant there was still hope, still purpose, still a reason to keep going. The British helped him to his feet, led him to a field hospital, fed him, treated his wounds, told him he'd be going home soon. Home to Sarah, home to Texas, home to a future he'd thought was lost forever. But Danny knew something the others didn't. Something that would take 38 more years to understand fully. He wasn't going home. Not really. Part of him would always be in that jungle, in that cell, in those 47 seconds suspended between earth and sky, looking into the eyes of a man who'd become his ghost. Home was a place he'd left behind the moment he pulled that trigger. Now he had to figure out how to find it again. July 15th, 1945, San Francisco Harbor. The troop ship docked at dawn. Danny Carson walked down the gangplank into America. 120 pounds, up from 93. 7 weeks of hospital food in Calcutta had put some weight back on. Not enough, never enough. His uniform hung loose. The Purple Heart pinned to his chest felt heavier than it should. The cane in his right hand was necessary. The shrapnel wound had healed badly. He'd walk with a limp for the rest of his life. But he was home. The processing center at Camp Stoneman was efficient. Medical check, pay settlement, discharge papers, questions about readjustment, offers of counseling that Danny declined. A sergeant handed him his final documents. "You're a free man, Lieutenant Carson. Thank you for your service." Danny nodded, couldn't speak. Free felt like a word from another language, a concept he'd forgotten how to understand. He bought a train ticket to Texas, 3 days across the country. 3 days watching America roll past the window. Fields, mountains, towns, cities, all untouched, all peaceful, all impossibly normal. People complained about rationing, about sugar shortages, about having to use coupons for gasoline. Danny listened and said nothing. What could he say? That he'd watched men die for a handful of rice, that he'd seen friends waste away to nothing, that he carried the face of a dead enemy in his memory like a photograph that wouldn't fade. He said nothing. The train pulled into Sweetwater at 3 in the afternoon on July 18th. The platform was packed, 2,000 people, the entire town, a banner stretched across Main Street. "Welcome home, Lieutenant Carson." A brass band played When Johnny Comes Marching Home. The mayor gave a speech about heroes and sacrifice and the American spirit. Danny stood there in his loose uniform and felt absolutely nothing. Then he saw Sarah. She pushed through the crowd, ran to him, threw her arms around him. He broke. Everything he'd been holding back for 14 months came out. He wept into her shoulder, shook, couldn't stop shaking. Sarah held him, said nothing, just held him while he fell apart in front of 2,000 people who thought they were witnessing a reunion. They were witnessing a collapse. "You're home," Sarah whispered. "You're safe. I've got you." Danny couldn't answer, could only hold on to her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had turned to water. Eventually, they led him to a car, drove him to his father's house, put him in his childhood bedroom, drew the curtains. Danny lay on the bed, stared at the ceiling, tried to remember how to be the person who'd left this room 3 years ago. That person was gone, dead, buried in a jungle grave somewhere in Burma. This person, this hollow thing that had come back, didn't know how to live in the world anymore. The first night home, Danny tried to sleep in his bedroom. Made it until 2 in the morning before the walls started closing in. The ceiling pressed down. The darkness became the isolation box. He stumbled outside, lay on the porch, stared at the stars. His father found him there at dawn. Thomas Carson was 58, owned the hardware store on Oak Street, didn't talk much, believed in hard work and honest dealing and keeping your troubles to yourself. He sat down on the porch next to his son, said nothing for a long time. Finally can't sleep inside. Danny shook his head. The nightmares, yeah. Your mother had nightmares too, after she got sick, before she passed. Danny had learned about his mother's death from a letter that reached him in the prison camp, 6 months after it happened. She died in February of 1943. Cancer. He'd missed the funeral, missed saying goodbye, missed everything. I'm sorry I wasn't here, Danny said. You were fighting a war. She understood. Did she? His father was quiet. Then she was proud of you. Wanted you to know that. Wanted you to come home and live, really live. Not just survive. I don't know how to do that anymore. You'll learn, his father stood. Take your time, the store's there when you're ready. No rush. He went inside. Danny stayed on the porch as the sun rose. Watched Sweetwater wake up. Watched people go to work. Watched the milkman make his rounds. Watched life continue like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Sarah came by every day, brought food, sat with him, talked about school, her students, small-town gossip. Nothing important, everything normal. Danny tried to respond, tried to care. Mostly he just stared. A week after his return, she brought fried chicken. Her famous fried chicken, the kind she'd made before the war, the kind Danny had dreamed about in the prison camp. I remembered the recipe you told me about, she said. Buttermilk soak, flour and pepper, cast iron skillet. She set the plate in front of him. The smell hit him like a physical force. Home, love, everything good about the world. Danny picked up a piece, bit into it. The taste exploded in his mouth. Crispy skin, juicy meat, the perfect blend of salt and pepper and Sarah's love made manifest in food. He started crying, put the chicken down, put his head in his hands, wept. Sarah moved next to him, held him. They're dead, Danny said. Tommy and Mark and Bobby and Davies, they're all dead, and I'm eating fried chicken. How is that fair? How do I get to be here eating this when they're rotting in unmarked graves? Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. They'd want you to eat Danny. They'd want you to live, to remember them. But to live, how do you know? Because that's what love is. Wanting the people you care about to be happy, even when you can't be. Danny looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since coming home. I'm different, he said. I'm not the man you fell in love with. I know. I've done things, seen things. I killed a man, Sarah. Shot him from 30 feet away, looked into his eyes. He didn't want to be there any more than I did. But I killed him anyway. Sarah took his hands. I don't need you to be the same person. I just need you to be here. We'll figure out the rest together. Danny wanted to believe her, wanted to think it could be that simple. It wasn't that simple, but it was a start. They married in June of 1947. Small ceremony, 50 guests, Reverend Patterson from the Presbyterian Church, simple vows. Danny promised to come home every day. Sarah understood what he meant. Not to leave her, not to let the war take him even now. She promised to be patient, to wait for him to find his way back from wherever the war had sent him. The reception was at the church hall. Texas barbecue, brisket, ribs, potato salad, coleslaw, corn on the cob, peach cobbler for dessert. Danny ate, tasted nothing, smiled when people toasted, danced with his bride, went through the motions. But inside he was somewhere else, always somewhere else. That night alone with Sarah in the house they'd rented on Elm Street, he tried to explain. There's a man I killed, a Japanese pilot. I see his face every day, every single day. I don't even know his name, but I carry him with me everywhere. Sarah listened, and there was another man, Kenji Yamamoto, Japanese-American. He saved my life, saved 20 of us. They executed him for it. I watched them kill him. I have his flag patch, his photograph, a letter to his parents. I need to find them, need to tell them what he did. Sarah nodded. Then we'll find them. And the pilot, I need to find his family too. Tell them he wasn't a monster, that he hesitated, that in another world we might have been friends. Then we'll find them too. How, I don't know, but we will, however long it takes. Danny pulled her close, held her, felt her heartbeat, steady, strong, real. Maybe he could find his way back. Maybe not all the way, but closer, step by step, day by day. Maybe. In 1948, their daughter was born, Rebecca, 8 pounds, 3 ounces, healthy, perfect. Danny held her for the first time and something cracked open in his chest, something that had been frozen since the war. Love, pure and simple, uncomplicated by guilt or grief. This tiny person didn't know about the war, didn't care about what he'd done, just needed him to be there, to be present, to be her father. He could do that. Maybe he couldn't be a good husband yet. Maybe he couldn't be a functioning member of society, but he could be a father. In 1950, their son was born. Danny named him Thomas Kenji. Thomas for Tommy Brennan, Kenji for Kenji Yamamoto. Sarah understood, said nothing, just nodded. In 1952, another son, James Hiroshi. James for James Davies, Hiroshi for the pilot Danny had killed. The nurse looked at the birth certificate. That's an unusual middle name. It's important, Danny said. It's a promise. The children grew. Danny worked at his father's hardware store, stocked shelves, helped customers. Did inventory, simple work, honest work, work that didn't require him to think too much. At night he wrote letters to the Japanese embassy, no response. To the Red Cross. They couldn't locate a Tanaka family. Too common a name. Too many possibilities. To the War Department. Hiroshi Tanaka's records were classified. To the California Department of Corrections. Looking for the Yamamoto family. The address Kenji had given him led to an internment camp that had been demolished. Dead ends. All of them. But Danny kept trying. Every March 31st, the anniversary of the shoot-down, Danny went to the cemetery, brought flowers, placed 5 stones, one for Tommy, one for Mark, one for Bobby, one for Davies, one for Kenji, and one more. Always one more. For Hiroshi Tanaka, enemy, ghost, brother in everything but name. The children asked questions as they got older. Why those middle names? Why the cemetery trips? Why did Daddy wake up screaming sometimes? Sarah answered as best she could. Your father fought in a war. He saw terrible things. He did what he had to do, but it cost him, and he's trying to make peace with that cost. The children didn't fully understand, but they knew their father was different, quieter, sadder, more present in body than in mind. They loved him anyway. 1982, February. Danny was 61 years old, retired from the hardware store, grandchildren, comfortable life, still haunted. The phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. Mr. Carson, this is Dr. Robert Yamashita. I'm a historian at UCLA. I've been researching Japanese Air Force records from World War II. I believe I've found something related to your service. Danny's heart started pounding. Yes, I have a file on Lieutenant Hiroshi Tanaka, the pilot you reported shooting down over Burma in March of 1944, the claim that was marked unconfirmed. Danny sat down, after 38 years, after decades of searching. Tell me, Dr. Yamashita explained. The Zero crash had been found, the body recovered, personal effects cataloged, including a photograph. A little girl, Dr. Yamashita said, age 5, with a bullet hole through it. Danny closed his eyes. Oh God. The bullet that killed Lieutenant Tanaka, the historian continued, passed through this photograph first. The photo deflected it slightly. Changed the trajectory. That's what made it fatal. Danny felt sick. I killed him through his daughter's picture. Mr. Carson, there's more. I found his widow, Yuki Tanaka. She lives in Kyoto. I told her about you, about your attempts to contact the family. She wants to meet you. What? She asked me to give you her address, to tell you she doesn't blame you, that she wants to talk. Why, I don't know. But she was very insistent. She said, and I quote, tell Mr. Carson I've waited 38 years to thank him. Thank me. Danny's voice broke. I killed her husband. I know, but she wants to meet you anyway. The package arrived a week later, 2 letters, one from Yuki Tanaka, one from someone named Sakura Tanaka. Danny opened Yuki's letter with shaking hands. Sarah sat next to him. The letter was in English, carefully written, every word chosen with precision. Dear Mr. Carson, my name is Yuki Tanaka. I am the widow of Lieutenant Hiroshi Tanaka, the pilot you shot down over Burma on March 31st, 1944. For 38 years I hated you. The American who took my husband. The enemy who made my daughter grow up without her father. But last year I found Hiroshi's diary, his private thoughts, the entries he made in the weeks before his death. He was conflicted, Mr. Carson. He didn't want to kill. He was a teacher before the war. He loved children. He loved peace. He was forced into something he didn't believe in. His last entry written the night before he died said this: Today I saw American prisoners, young men. One looked like he could have been a teacher too. I thought if we met in peacetime, maybe we could have been colleagues, friends. This war makes enemies of people who should be brothers. Mr. Carson, my husband saw your humanity before you ever met, and I believe in those last seconds when you faced each other, he saw it again. You gave him a quick death. You could have let him suffer. You could have shot him in the back while he attacked others, but you faced him, and I believe that mattered. I do not hate you anymore, Mr. Carson. I thank you. You have spent 38 years trying to honor his memory. You named your son after him. You remembered him as a man, not just an enemy. That is more than I could have asked. My daughter Sakura wants to meet you. She is 43 now, a teacher like her father wanted to be. She wants to thank the man who gave her father peace. Please write back. With respect and gratitude, Yuki Tanaka. Danny read the letter 3 times. 4 times, couldn't process it. Sarah read it too, then looked at her husband. You have to go, she said. What? You have to go to Japan, meet them. This is what you've been waiting for, what you've needed. I killed him, and she forgives you. Let her. Danny opened the second letter. From Sakura. Mr. Carson, I never knew my father. I was 5 when he died, but my mother kept his photograph of me, the one you shot, the one with the bullet hole. I used to hate that photograph. It reminded me of violence, of loss. Now I understand. My father carried me into battle, and in his last moment, maybe he thought of me. Maybe that brought him peace. You gave him a quick death. You remembered him as a man. You tried for 38 years to find us and tell us he fought with honor. Thank you. I teach 5-year-olds now, like my father did before the war, like he wanted to do again after. I tell them that wars make enemies, but peace makes friends. Will you be my friend? Mr. Carson Sakura Tanaka. Danny folded the letters carefully, put them in his desk drawer next to Kenji's flag patch. Then he booked 2 tickets to Japan. May 1983. Kyoto. Danny and Sarah stood outside a small apartment building in a quiet neighborhood. Danny's hands shook, his heart raced. 39 years. 39 years of carrying this weight. And now maybe he could finally put it down. Sarah squeezed his hand. You can do this. He knocked. The door opened. A woman stood there, 61 years old, gray hair, gentle face, eyes that had seen their share of sorrow. Yuki Tanaka. Mr. Carson, she said, welcome. You are a guest of honor in my home. She bowed. Danny bowed back. I'm so sorry, he began, for your loss, for everything. Yuki smiled, sad smile, knowing smile. Please come in. We have much to talk about. The apartment was small, neat, a Buddhist shrine in one corner with Hiroshi's photograph. Not the military portrait, a civilian photo, young man, smiling, in teacher's clothing, human. Danny stared at the photo, saw the face, but different. Not the warrior in the cockpit, the man before the war, the person Hiroshi had been. This is who he was, Yuki said softly, before they made him into something else. She served tea. They sat on cushions, talked. Yuki told stories about Hiroshi, how they met, their wedding, Sakura's birth, his love of teaching, his gentleness with children, his dreams of opening his own school someday. He didn't want to fight, Yuki said, but in Japan at that time, you didn't have a choice. You served or you were a traitor, so he served, but it broke something in him. Danny pulled out his own photographs. Sarah. The children, the grandchildren. This is Thomas Kenji, he said, named for a friend who died saving me. And this is James Hiroshi, named for another friend, and for your husband. Yuki's eyes filled with tears. You honored him. All these years, I tried, but I'm the one who killed him. And he would have killed you if you hadn't. That's what war does. It forces good men to do terrible things. The door opened. A woman entered. 43, kind face, teacher's bearing, Sakura. She saw Danny, stopped. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then Sakura spoke. Her English was good. Careful. Mr. Carson, thank you for coming. Thank you for remembering my father. Danny stood. Tried to speak. Couldn't. Sakura approached. Pulled something from her bag. The photograph. 5-year-old Sakura, missing her front teeth. Smiling. Bullet hole through the center. I've carried this my whole life, Sakura said. A reminder of what war costs. But also a reminder that my father loved me. That he carried me with him. That even in battle he thought of me. She held it out to Danny. And now I want you to have it. Not as a burden, as a gift. My father's memory. Keep it. Honor it. And know that his daughter forgives you. More than forgives. Thanks you. For giving him peace. For remembering him. For making his death mean something. Danny took the photograph. Hands shaking. Tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Sakura embraced him. So did Yuki. The four of them stood there in that small Kyoto apartment. 2 nations, 2 families, 1 moment of grace. Sarah wept too. For her husband. For the burden he'd carried. For the release he was finally finding. They spent the day together, shared meals, stories, laughter, and tears. They went to Hiroshi's grave, a Buddhist temple in the hills, cherry trees blooming. Yuki spoke to the grave in Japanese, then translated for Danny. Hiroshi, I bring you a friend. Not an enemy, a friend. Mr. Carson has honored you for 39 years. Now we honor you together. Danny placed a stone on the grave, then spoke. His voice shook, but he got the words out. Lieutenant Tanaka, I took your life. I can never give it back, but I can give you this. I promise your daughter will know you were a good man. I promise your grandchildren will know you fought with honor. I promise I will tell everyone. Japanese soldiers were not monsters. They were fathers, brothers, sons, like you. He paused. I carry you with me, every day, every March 31st, every time I see my children, every time I thank God I survived. I survived because I was luckier, not better, not more deserving, just luckier. Rest in peace, my friend. Rest knowing you are remembered, not as an enemy, as a brother. They all wept, released, healed, connected across the impossible divide of war and death and time. Little Sakura's daughter Hana, 5 years old, was there too. She tugged on her grandmother's sleeve. Grandma, why is the American man crying? Sakura knelt down. Because he loved your grandfather, even though they never really met. That's what peace is, Hana, loving people across all the things that divide us. The child considered this, then walked to Danny, took his hand. Thank you for loving my grandfather, she said in careful English. Danny looked down at this child. Same age Sakura had been when Hiroshi died. The circle, the cycle, the generations. You're welcome, sweetheart. Your grandfather was a good man. Danny lived 23 more years after that trip to Kyoto. He and Yuki became friends, wrote letters, exchanged photographs. The families visited back and forth. American grandchildren met Japanese grandchildren. Barriers dissolved. In 1990, the Sweetwater Gazette ran a feature story. Local veteran finds peace with former enemy 46 years later. The article went national. Hundreds of letters poured in. Other veterans sharing their own reconciliation stories. Japanese-American groups thanking Danny for honoring Kenji. In 1992, Kenji's brother James Yamamoto contacted Danny. The families had thought Kenji died a traitor. Danny gave them the flag patch, the letter, the truth. They wept, thanked him, started a campaign to get Kenji recognized officially. The military denied it. He'd served in Japanese uniform, but Sacramento named a street after him. Kenji Yamamoto Way. A plaque. Japanese American who died protecting American POWs. Danny spoke at the dedication, told the story, made sure everyone knew. Kenji was an American hero. In 1995, Sakura visited Texas, spoke at Sweetwater High School, told the students about her father and Danny, about enemies becoming family, about peace being possible. She and Danny started a program together. Enemies to Friends, teaching peace through personal stories. They spoke at schools, veterans groups, churches, anywhere that would listen. The message was simple. War makes enemies. Understanding makes peace. Peace makes family. Sarah died in 2004. Cancer, age 82. Danny was devastated, but Yuki came from Japan, sat with him, held his hand while he grieved. You gave her a good life, Yuki said. She was loved. That's what matters. At the funeral, Japanese and American flags flew side by side. Yuki spoke. Sakura spoke. The whole town witnessed two nations bound not by war, but by love. Danny's health declined after Sarah's death. The old wounds, the malaria, the years catching up. In 2006, March 31st, the 62nd anniversary, Danny was too weak to go to the cemetery. But he made the pilgrimage in his mind, counted the stones. Tommy, Mark, Bobby, Davies, Kenji, Hiroshi. I survived to tell your stories, he whispered. Mission complete. He died peacefully on May 26th, age 85, surrounded by children and grandchildren. His last words to his grandson, Thomas Kenji, were clear. Strong, remember, every enemy is someone's father. Brother, son, if you must fight, fight with honor. But better yet, make peace. The funeral was massive. Yuki flew from Japan at age 84. Sakura came. Hana, now 28. James Yamamoto and his family. Over 100 veterans, the entire town. Sakura spoke, gave the eulogy. Mr. Carson killed my father 42 years before I met him, but he spent 60 years honoring his memory. That is not what an enemy does. That is what family does. She held up the photograph. The bullet-damaged photo of 5-year-old Sakura. This photograph killed my father, but it also saved Mr. Carson. It helped him find us. It brought our families together. Now it represents something beautiful. Two nations, two families, one piece. She placed it on the coffin, next to an American flag. Thank you, Mr. Carson, for remembering, for honoring, for teaching us that hate is a choice. And love is a choice, too. Rest in peace, our friend. They buried Danny in Pioneer Cemetery, Sweetwater. The headstone was simple. Daniel Carson, 1921 to 2006. Lieutenant U.S. Army Air Forces. Purple Heart. Husband. Father. Grandfather. Peacemaker. Beneath that one line, I fought to survive. I lived to forgive. I died at peace. Yuki placed a Japanese peace crane on the grave. The American flag was folded, presented to the family. Two symbols, two nations, one family. 1 year later, Danny's family received an unexpected package from Tokyo. Inside was a letter from the Guyanese government and a medal, the Order of the Rising Sun, Japan's highest civilian honor. The letter explained, in recognition of Lieutenant Daniel Carson's efforts to promote peace and reconciliation between the United States and Japan, for honoring Japanese war dead, for teaching both nations that former enemies can become friends. In August 2008, the family traveled to Tokyo for the ceremony. Thomas Kenji accepted the medal on his father's behalf. His speech was broadcast across Japan and America. My father would have been humbled by this honor. He always said he wasn't a hero, that he just did what anyone should do. Remember the fallen as people. Honor their sacrifice. Make peace. But Dad, you were wrong. Not everyone does this. Not everyone spends 60 years trying to heal the wounds of war. Not everyone names their children after enemies and friends alike. Not everyone teaches forgiveness. You were a hero, not for shooting down the zero, for what you did after, for 60 years of remembering, for 60 years of honoring, for 60 years of teaching that understanding is stronger than hatred. Your legacy lives on. Sakura teaches peace in Kyoto. Hana teaches peace in Tokyo. I teach peace in Texas. 3 families, 2 nations, 1 message. War makes enemies. Understanding makes peace. Peace makes family. Thomas Kenji held up two photographs, one of his father, one of Hiroshi Tanaka. These men met for 47 seconds in combat. One lived, one died. But their families are joined forever. Not by blood, by choice, by forgiveness, by love. That's the real miracle. Not the impossible shot that made my father famous, but the possible peace that made our families whole. Thank you, Dad. Your mission is truly complete now. The crowd stood, Japanese, Americans, veterans from both sides, all applauding, all witnessing the final chapter of a story that began in hatred and ended in healing. All understanding that peace is always possible, always worth fighting for, always within reach if we choose to extend our hands across the divide. Danny Carson and Hiroshi Tanaka met as enemies in the sky over Burma. Their families met as friends in the gardens of Kyoto. And the world learned that the distance between those two meetings is the exact distance we all must travel. From fear to understanding, from hatred to forgiveness, from war to peace. It's a long journey. 60 years for Danny, 39 for the families. But it's always worth taking, because at the end of that journey, enemies become brothers, strangers become family, and the impossible becomes the inevitable. Two men, one moment, 60 years of consequences, 3 generations of healing. That's the story of the last honor. Not the honor of killing well in war, but the honor of living well in peace. If your father served in the Pacific, share his story in the comments. If you believe peace is stronger than hatred, hit that like button. If you think former enemies can become friends, subscribe and share this story. Because every enemy is someone's father. Every war ends eventually. And every peace begins with one person choosing forgiveness over bitterness. Be that person, like Danny Carson was, like Yuki Tanaka was, like all of us can be. The war is over. The peace is just beginning, and it starts with you.